another episode of Inside the Recording Studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me, as always, is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How are you today, Chris?
I am actually a little bit under the weather, but
Ooh.
I'm going to try to rise above here and be a pro. So if I start talking about sailboats or anything, just stop
Cut you
me,
off
right?
and move on.
Right.
All right.
Yeah. No, apart from that, I'm all right. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I am
Yeah.
ready to get into a little bit of a hyper mode because we're talking about what? The Hyperswitch.
Yes. From?
Seymour Duncan, baby.
Yeah. This is cool. This was something that we both saw at NAMM.
We did.
And we both went like, wow, that's really cool.
Yes, and we mentioned that very much so on the NAMM episode a few weeks back. So now we've had a chance to actually play with this device. What exactly is it, Chris?
It's a replacement five-way switch that works with any passive guitar pickup that you may have. And it's fully programmable via an app that is available for your mobile device. It's powered by a 9-volt battery, but you basically can store settings on all those 5 positions that you have in the switch. And you can do all sorts of fun stuff that we'll get into a little bit later with that. But the flexibility is what floored both you and I when we saw it in NAMM.
Exactly. Right? And just to reiterate, it is for passive guitar pickups only, not for anything active, unfortunately.
Yet, anyway, right? I'm not sure if that will.
Yes.
Right. It's also important to point out here, I think, as well, because guitar players can be a little bit technophobic sometimes, but it is strictly an analog thing. There's no emulation or anything that's going on here. And if this sounds somewhat familiar to some of us old timers, right? There are other switching systems that have been around. Like, you know, they used to have in the Tom Anderson guitars, and it was another manufacturer that had something that was promised to change the game, as it were.
But
And
you had to buy the whole
that.
guitar that went with it to do that.
That's right. So this is definitely the smoothest implementation that I've seen.
Right.
I think it's badass, man. I think it's really, really cool.
The one thing to really note is that, as we've mentioned at the top here, it is a 5-way switch. And it looks just like a 5-way switch. And it feels just like a 5-way switch.
Yeah. So there's nothing to get used to there,
Right.
right? So it's just more flexible. And why would you not want that?
Well,
right?
The idea here from Seymour Duncan, as it was explained to us at NAMM, is they were targeting more of the producer session guitar player kind of guys with this thing.
Yeah. And obviously the flexibility that would afford, right? Where you can just have it, not necessarily even just the tonal options, right? But assign pickup configurations to whatever slot that you want on your 5-way. If you're just a Strat player, we know that this is how it's wired, right? And it's not like you couldn't change it, but you generally have to take it to your tech and experiment and this and that.
Well,
Now
when you say experiment and take it to your tech, you're referring to the old school version of a 5-way switch. Where
yes, sir.
Position 1 is the bridge pickup, position 2 is bridge and middle, position 3 is the middle, position 4 is middle and neck, and position 5 is just the neck pickup. And if you want to modify beyond that on a standard 5-way switch, you either have to be handy with a soldering iron or you have to take it to somebody who is that can mess around with it. And of course, that involves taking the strings off, that involves taking the pick guard off if it has a pick guard, or coming from the backside of the guitar if it's slotted up through the back. All these kind of things take a lot of time to get you to more esoteric settings on the 5-way switch.
Right. And then if you throw humbucking pickups into the mix as well, so like you have 2 humbuckers and a single in the middle, or whatever configuration you have, you can naturally have it wired so that you would do in certain configurations that would be out of phase and stuff. It's generally complicated to do if you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly.
Right? Here, it's instantaneous, right? So you can just do it through the app.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
And essentially what Chris is attempting to tell you here is that this opens up all kinds of options when it comes to the 5-way switch concept and multiple pickups in a guitar.
Right. What I was trying to get there as well, and I have to blame my medication, but please bear with me. Obviously, things that you can do with, you can split your humbuckers, you could change the phase of the pickups, you can change the polarity, you can have like the north and the south coils in different configurations, all of that kind of stuff. What all of that means to me is kind of like less important what's actually going on, but it's more for the sound, right? But what it does is that it really allows you a lot of tonal flexibility when we're kind of doing that.
Right.
So,
and the interesting thing with this, and you mentioned the app very briefly, it is for your mobile device, either your phone or your tablet, and it comes with an interface that you set up that represents your guitar once you've got it connected to your device. You tell it, I have this kind of pickup in the neck, I have this kind of pickup in the middle, and I have this kind of pickup in the bridge. And once you have that, you literally can just tap things on the screen to see and hear the changes to the pickup.
Yeah, right. And that was, even at NAMM when we saw it, that was like, wow, that's freaking cool. Because
the interface looks great. There's no question about it.
And
I couldn't really
real
hear
time.
it, but now we've had a chance to put these in our own guitars and hear that it's a whole other ball game, which is why we're doing an entire episode just on this device alone.
Yeah, and it is via Bluetooth, right? So that's why
that's why you need the 9-volt battery,
right? For what's added to the 5-way switch there, but it just connects, and then somebody's gonna think initially like, well, do I need to have my phone with me when I play? The answer to that is no. It's just when you're programming the switch
to do whatever it is you want it to do. Yes.
Right. So that's what I think was like the really seamless thing, right? And the fact that you can experiment so much with reversing phase on pickups and all these kind of things, and you hear the results in real time. So it really, really encourages experimentation. And I know I had a lot of fun with this and came up with some kind of cool results, and I'm sure you did too.
Yes, I did. But before we actually start talking about those things, let's talk about how the installation process can go. How about your experience in installing one of these things in one of your guitars?
Mine was really straightforward and pretty easy. I actually did it myself. I should preface that by saying that I'm not somebody who generally enjoys working on their guitar. I prefer to give it off to the tech, but this is so stupid simple. The guitar I put it in had a 5-way switch. I had Seymour Duncan pickups in it. Still do have Seymour Duncan pickups. I had a hot rail in the bridge position and a cool rail in the neck, no middle pickup. Since it was Seymour Duncan pickups, they're color-coded. So there's no soldering involved, apart from
taking it off of the knobs that you already had in there, yeah.
Right. It's just a matter of cleaning up the connectors a little bit once you unsolder them from your old system. And you don't even solder them into this thing. It's just a screwdriver that comes with it, and it's really, really easy to do.
Well, and the fact that it's also a Seymour Duncan device and you had Seymour Duncan pickups, you just follow the color code right there. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, right. It's so easy, guitar players can do it, right? Yeah, so for me, it was really straight ahead. No problem at all. Really, really easy. I think it took me a half hour, if that.
Well, that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
You didn't put your tone knob, though, right?
No, that's true. The guitar I have it in, I never really use my tone knobs. So they're just there for decoration to not have two holes. I didn't bother with that. I might in the future because, as you will explain, that there's some pretty cool functionality that comes along with that.
Yes.
I also was fortunate enough that in the body cavity, I had room for the 9-volt.
Right.
It was no extra routing or anything like that. So for me, it's like, it was a really straightforward process. Now, yours was a little bit more elaborate, though, so maybe tell us about that.
Yes. I chose to put this into a guitar that has a 5-way switch in it. It is an Ibanez, or Ibanez, depending on how you like to pronounce it, Universe. Universe number 96, which is kind of fun because
that's still crazy to me that you have that number.
Anyway, I took it to the guy that builds my guitars and does a lot of the work on my guitars because I felt it would be fun to have somebody that knows what they're doing to do it, for one. And two, I have multiple different pickups in it. I do not have all of the standard what came with the Universe pickups in it. And the reason for that is the bridge pickup is a custom-built Seymour Duncan custom 7-string pickup that I had made before they started making 7-string pickups.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And I hadn't really seen it since the day I got it and put it in. The middle pickup that I have is the original DiMarzio pickup casing, but it was sent off to Canada at one point because of an old Canadian music roommate that I had who pleaded with me to have it rewired by some guy he knew up in Canada. And then I got it back and put it in roughly around the same time I had the custom Seymour Duncan made. And then the neck pickup is a standard, what came with the guitar, DiMarzio humbucker as well. And in pulling it apart, the Seymour Duncan, I had no idea how they actually made it, but it was obvious in looking at it a few days ago when I had the switch put in. We looked at it, and my tech, Justin, who did it, he was like, "Did you have this made?" And I said, "Yeah." And we're looking at it, and it's because the bottom plate, you can tell that they took 2 6-string pickups and cut them and planted them together. I don't know how they did the magnets and all that kind of stuff, but they had not been building 7-string pickups at that time. Now they obviously have 7, 8, and 9-string pickups, I think, so it's no big deal for them anymore. Anyway, we attempted to put everything back in once we got the switch in, and it was quite simple, removing the solder, sticking the wires in, color-coded. The Seymour Duncan was obviously the easiest. The single coil middle pickup was also easy because the hot and ground leads are obvious, but the DiMarzio pickup required a little bit of searching on the internet to find out what wires went where.
Yeah,
because their color coding is different from the Seymour Duncan thing. We got that sorted out, stuck it in, screwed it all into the switch, put the switch back in, attempted to put the pick guard back on, and realized, oh shit, there's not enough room here. So the Ibanez is not routed for like a whole lot of room in the Universe for some reason for a wider, slightly more in-depth 5-way switch. In addition to that, it also has the tone knob along with the volume knob, and there wasn't even room for putting the 9-volt in. So the tech had to keep it for an extra night, take it to his shop where he builds guitars, and route out more area and space for the switch and the 9-volt. Then I got it back the next day, plugged it in at his guitar shop, played around with the app real quick after I got it connected to the Hyperswitch, and they were also floored by the fact that I'm sitting here, oh, let's try what this would do, and bing, and hit and touch the screen, and all of a sudden the sound just changes dramatically, and they're like, whoa, that's really wild. Obviously, if you have a guitar that already has a 5-way switch and it's designed for a 9-volt battery and whatnot, your installation process is going to be quite simple as per Chris's installation. But it's also possible that you take your guitar apart and you realize, oh, wow, there might need to be some modifications that need to be made for your guitar in order to fit this stuff in. And that was my experience.
Yeah. Overall, they're pretty straightforward. And to keep in mind there, just to reiterate that this works with, obviously you had some custom pickups and a DiMarzio and the custom Seymour Duncan there.
Right. And they were all passive, so it worked just fine.
Right. Yeah.
One other thing to note is that both of the switches that Chris and I got came pre-wired for the 9-volt battery. And they do very specifically say in the installation instructions, be careful how the 9-volt battery connection is wired. And I believe it's because if you wire it backwards and you plug it into the battery, you probably fry the thing.
Yeah, that's what to say. You could potentially fry the unit where it's beyond repair. So
we were fortunate in that it already came wired with the battery connector.
Right.
And in terms of other fortunate things, let's take a word from our sponsors. And we're back. We're going to jump over here to our initial impressions and how we started setting things up once we had these things installed in our respective guitars. And Chris, you're going to kick it off by telling us what your favorite settings are with this.
Well, first, let me just say that I had a lot of fun experimenting with this. Mm-hmm. And even though I have it in just a 2 pickup guitar, they are rails, so they're essentially stacked single coils, so they're, for all intents and purposes, humbuckers, right? So that affords me a fair bit of flexibility as compared to if I had just 3 single coils. There wouldn't be as many options.
Right.
Plenty of options still. But what I was doing was I was experimenting with little things, and also something that I've always kind of wanted to do, just never enough to take it to a tech and have it done that way, but is to change up how I use the 5-way switch and which pickup is where.
Right.
So while I'm in position number 1 all the way down, right, I'm still have my full bridge humbucker. Mm-hmm. Normally when you play clean stuff, or at least when I play clean stuff, I'm in position number 4, which would be the neck and middle pickup normally, right? The process then for me is always like hit the switch up all the way and then bring it back one for like live use and stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's a bit of a pain. So now I could correct this with this. So what I did is I had that same sort of configuration for my clean sound, but that's now in spot number 5.
Nice.
So because then I can just kind of hit it up and then I'm on clean, right?
Right.
So then what to do with if I just want the neck humbucker? Well, that's now in position number 2. Instead. So if I'm playing bridge humbucker all the way down, just come up 1 step and it's the neck.
Right.
That was one thing I did. But then I went a little bit further. I toyed with the idea of actually having one position as a kill switch where I had no pickups active, right? Because you can actually do that.
Right.
I didn't do that this time, but with presets and stuff, I probably will in the future. I went a little bit more esoteric. So now what I have on my middle spot, 3rd spot, I'm using both pickups, but they are split. I'm just using south coils on both of those to give me a little bit of a thinner sound. Works great for clean stuff, but also kind of dirty kind of things where you just want a little bit more of a kind of a scoop tone. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Right.
And then the last spot then, in this case, spot number 4, I just went nuts with the experimentation, and I wanted something that was going to give me like a really, really clean, almost like a scooped sound that's not going to be nice and full, but just almost like an effect or like an 80s clean DI'd guitar type of thing. Yes. And I accomplished that with just playing around with the phase and coil taps and all this kind of stuff, and I ended up with something. And talking about what I actually did doesn't make any sense unless you hear it. You just kind of have to play around with it. Again, 2 pickup system, there's a lot of flexibility. So I really enjoyed this thing, and I see a lot of uses for it. I really, really liked it. That's where I'm sitting right now, but I'll probably play more with it in the future. What about you, though? What did you do? Because you're Mr. Preset, man. You have presets for everything. So
yes. To describe these preset situations, you have this 5-way switch. All the way down is 1, and then it goes up sequentially to 5 when it's all the way up. The app allows you to actually reverse that in case you put it in backwards, or in the case of an installation where if you do reverse it because it would fit better without having to route your guitar, which didn't work for me. We tried to reverse it. It still didn't fit. I had to route the guitar.
But that's a nice option if you don't have to and you don't want to route your guitar.
Yeah, the app will actually allow you to reverse the order of the switch. That being said, each one is considered a setting that can be saved in and of itself. Once you have 5 settings, you can save those 5 settings, or even if you don't use 5 settings, you can save whatever settings you have as an actual preset. And then you can name the preset and do crazy stuff later. For me, once I got home with it, after messing around with it at the shop, I thought, well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up as a normal guitar, where this is originally how it was wired before I put the Hyperswitch in. Position 1, bridge humbucker. Position 2, bridge humbucker, middle, single coil. Position 3, single coil in the middle. Position 4, the neck humbucker and the middle single coil. And then position 5, the neck humbucker. I also left the tone knob in, and this is where I should mention the fact that the tone knob in and of itself has 3 settings in the app interface. You get off, where it takes the tone knob out of the signal chain from the pickup to the amp and the output. Then it has a first setting, which is like this grade setting. And that's your tone knob as it is, as it's actually wired in the guitar. And then they have a blue setting, which is the third setting for the tone knob, which changes the tone knob's output and ohmage, I believe it is, so that you retain a bit more of the high end, but it changes the actual quality of how it tapers. And it's pretty wild. It's a subtle change, but it works. So my first group of 5 was set up as the normal guitar, saved as a preset. Then I took all the pickups and the 5-way positions that it was, still left the tone knob the same, but reversed them all, because that's one of the options, is you can reverse the output of the pickups. Then I did another one where I did the standard one with the tone knob set to the change in tone, and I then copied that and did it again as all of them reversed. Now, in playing around with it, before I start getting into real esoteric settings on it, because I haven't quite saved any presets with the esoteric settings yet, but I will. The humbuckers come with all of these different things, and Chris kind of mentioned it with the fact that you can play it as the full humbucker. Then you can play it in the full humbucking mode in reverse. Then you can reverse the phase of the coils in and of themselves. Then you can tap the coils. There's also 2 settings, one called, I believe it's PR, and the other one's PRP. And that is, you're reversing the coil, and one of them is hot going into it. The other one is you're reversing it and it's hot coming out of it. I don't understand what all that actually means, but when I listen to it, there are subtle variations on it, and it's really wild.
Yeah, it's bottom line is it sounds cool.
It does sound cool.
You know,
and essentially each humbucker gets you roughly around 7 settings. And if you've got like 3 of them with 7 settings, well, it's 7 times 7 times 7. So it becomes huge. Now I have 2 humbuckers and a single coil, and the single coil only has 2 settings. You've got your normal phase and then your reverse phase. I don't have as many as 7 times 7 times 7. I have like 7 times 2 times 7. So it's still a crazy amount of options that I can move in with. But that being said, there are some drawbacks to this, don't you think?
There are. All the options that you mentioned there, your head starts spinning, right?
Option
you can easily get lost in that, right? Option paralysis. But obviously, you need to have or be able to fit a 9-volt into your guitar. Mm-hmm. And if not, you need to do some routing, right? As with active pickups, your 9-volt can die. I guess that's a drawback that you need to be prepared for if you're playing live or something. That's not ideal,
Right, exactly.
That's just standard guitar care. Right. If you're an active pickup guy, I have a lot of EMGs in a few of my guitars, so it would not work on those. If you're one of those guys, this is not for you. Also, it's a 5-way switch only at the time. If you're like a Les Paul kind of guy, you have a 3-way switch. Again, this is not going to work.
It would require heavy modification to put one in for that.
Right. Another thing that both you and I pointed out at NAMM, and we thought, ooh, that would be cool.
Right.
And it's not implemented yet. Yeah. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take this up because I already miss the fact that this doesn't do this yet. And I'm hoping that there's maybe some simple firmware upgrade that they can do. And then you just have to maybe lose one of your tone knob inputs, because you can put 2 tone knobs into this thing. It's the volume. When you start messing around with some of the options that you can do, not only does it change the tone drastically, sometimes it's a very massive difference in volume from one setting to another. And it would be really cool to be able to have a volume level setting in the app itself to allow you to control the output based on whatever it is you're doing with these settings. Because some of the volume changes are rather drastic, and it's a little weird if you set it up where one is like super loud and then you go to another that's really phasey sounding but rather quiet.
Yeah, especially if you're thinking for live use there. right?
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
would
if
be
you're
really
recording, you can always get around that, but it would be handy to have. So let's say if you've got one of these kind of funky settings that you mentioned that drops the output a fair bit, maybe boost a couple of dB or something would be nice.
It would be nice. And that's not currently something that it can do. So hopefully Seymour Duncan will make that happen, but it's not a deal breaker for getting this device. The real question is it for everybody?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think everybody feels like they need that kind of flexibility. As I mentioned before as well, I think although this is a completely analog signal path, there's no emulation again. It's just that.
Well, and it's not running through any electronics, technically speaking, either.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, but some guitar players are known to be kind of tech phobic, right? And it's like, no, it needs to be standard, this and that.
It's still a fully analog signal path, and they reiterate that in their user guide. So be aware that it is analog, not electronic.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people would be excited about it if they tried it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think it goes beyond the producer and studio guy.
Oh,
personally.
Totally. Yeah. One thing that I was thinking about with this and the tonal control that you get is that even though that I have 2 rails in my guitar, I can almost emulate the sound of a Tele if you're playing around with different options out of phase and switch polarity and that kind of thing. I think for live use as well, it's like it might, allow you to bring one guitar less to the show, if you will.
Sure.
And if
you can actually bring your phone and your mobile device with you and on the fly switch your presets right there.
You could do that as well, right?
That,
yeah. Right. So I think that's another thing where the tonal flexibility are so great that you might actually you need less guitars. I would never encourage anybody to have less guitars, but the point is still there. What about anything else that you think about those?
No, I feel like we've raved about this device enough that it's time for our Friday finds. Chris, what have you got for us this week?
Well, I continue on this guitar trend, and I continue on the Heaviosity trend. I'm a big Heaviosity fan, and they just released Damage guitars. Now, with a name like that, you know what they sound like. So if you're the kind of producer or writer that does like trailer stuff and things, and you don't want to call somebody like me and Jody to do guitars for you, you could use this library. It sounds really, really cool. I mean, I do that kind of stuff anyway, but it's a Heaviosity product, man. So Damage Guitars by Heaviosity is my find for this Friday. And what do you have?
I'm going with a guitar-oriented type of thing this week as well. I'm going with the Archetype Tom Morello, which is a new amp sim from Neural DSP. You can get Tom Morello's Marshall, his cabinet, his foot pedals, and his whammy pedal stuff as well, all in one singular plug-in interface. So if you're a huge Tom Morello fan and you want to combine the Hyperswitch with Tom Morello, you're going to have a lot of frickin' options. It's just crazy.
Absolutely. You're off to the races.
That's right. While we've got your attention, we ask that you go to InsideTheRecordingStudio.com and sign up for our mailing list. You'll need to be on said email list to be eligible for any of our giveaways that we do in the future, and we'll make sure you don't miss any future episodes of this amazing podcast. Send us an email at goldstar, GOLDSTAR, at InsideTheRecordingStudio.com with the word Hyperswitch, and you'll get something cool back in your inbox. If you have a topic or suggestion for Chris and I to explain in a future episode, contact us at the contact page, and we'll put it into consideration for a future episode. With that, I'll say see you next week.
Have a good one, Jody. Thanks for listening, everybody.